Some Golden Age icons were very twisted. They had weird bedroom preferences, abandoned their children, and even slept with their dogs. Others suffered from mental issues, while others had too much trauma. But away from the cameras and scripted interviews, you'd be in awe of the unspeakable things these celebrities did. Walt Disney. You likely think of enchanted castles, Mickey Mouse, and magical childhood movies. But what if I told you that the man behind the curtain wasn't all fairy dust and feel-good stories? Beneath the polished image of the ultimate dream maker was a more complicated figure. For all his creativity, Walt Disney had a darker side. It is often ignored, like a forgotten sketch in the animation room. Let's start with the whispers that never seemed to die. Accusations of sexism and racism. Early Disney films like Dumbo and Peter Pan are peppered with stereotypes that, by today's standards, raise eyebrows or drop jaws. The crows in Dumbo, with their exaggerated dialects, and the "What Made the Red Man Red" song in Peter Pan paint an uncomfortable picture of cultural insensitivity. And while Disney's defenders argue he was a product of his time, others claim these weren't isolated incidents but reflections of deeper biases. Then there's the issue of how he treated women. Disney was notorious for hiring women in low-level roles, often as inkers and painters. There were few opportunities for advancement. A rejection letter from the studio, which explicitly told a female applicant that women were not considered for creative positions, still circulates as a reminder of how rigid those gender barriers were under his leadership. Disney's reputation as an employer wasn't all sunshine and Mickey-shaped ice cream bars either. He was known to be controlling and micromanaging every aspect of his films and theme parks. This intensity might explain the precision of the Disney empire, but it also made him a nightmare to work for. During the 1941 animators' strike, Disney was accused of union busting, refusing to negotiate fairly with employees who demanded better wages and working conditions. He reportedly labeled union members as communists and ratted out several industry figures to the FBI during the McCarthy era, a move that alienated many of his peers. So was Walt Disney a visionary? Absolutely. But he was also a man whose ambition came with a fair share of controversy. Joan Crawford. She was a beloved, famous actress, but she became the focus of one of Hollywood's biggest scandals, and everything crashed down. It all started when her adopted daughter, Christina Crawford, released the book Mommy Dearest. The shocking memoir described Joan as a harsh, controlling mother. It said she was known for her outbursts and for punishing with wire hangers. Christina accused her of constant emotional and physical abuse. She said Joan was obsessed with perfection. This need for control reportedly made their home a tense and miserable place. These claims were a far cry from the glamorous and charming image Joan showed the world, leaving fans struggling to reconcile the two sides of her. Whether you believe Christina's story or think it was exaggerated, Joan Crawford is still one of Hollywood's most chilling mysteries. The star who dazzled on screen also left behind a much darker, more complicated story in her personal life. Clara Bow. As the original It Girl, Clara was the wild and carefree face of the Roaring Twenties. If there was ever a star who lived like there was no tomorrow, it was Clara. She wasn't just famous, she was infamous. She partied hard, loved without rules, and laughed in the face of Hollywood's uptight moral code. But with fame came scandal, and Clara seemed to attract it like moths to a flame. The stories about her were wild, and not all of them were flattering. People whispered about her lavish, no-holds-barred parties where booze and jazz flowed freely. Rumors swirled about her affairs with both men and women. Then there was that infamous gossip about a love triangle. It involved her secretary and even a dog. The juicier tales were likely pure tabloid fiction, but they stuck to her, fueling her reputation as Hollywood's wild child. But Clara wasn't just a gossip column headline. She was a force. Her rebellious, carefree attitude shocked the stuffy, conservative society of the time. Audiences adored her because she felt real. She wasn't the perfectly polished, untouchable star. She was raw, messy, and authentic. But fame took its toll. Behind all that exterior was a woman struggling with the pressures of being constantly judged and sensationalized. John Barrymore. A brilliant actor known for his striking looks and captivating stage presence, he was also a master of self-destruction. His talent was undeniable, but his personal life was a chaotic mess of alcoholism and outrageous antics. Barrymore's battles with alcoholism were legendary. He wasn't the kind of guy who just had one too many at the bar. He lived in excess. He was infamous for bizarre behavior that blurred the line between eccentric and downright shocking. He reportedly loved to carry human skulls. He claimed they were props for his Shakespearean performances. Imagine someone casually pulling out a skull at a dinner party. It was peak Barrymore. Then there's the story of his drunken portrait. Barrymore once posed for a painting while completely nude, holding nothing but a cigar and his unwavering confidence. It wasn't just a one-off stunt, it was a perfect snapshot of his larger-than-life personality. While his outrageous behavior made him a Hollywood legend, it also contributed to his downfall. His drinking eventually took over, and his once thriving career faded. Yet, even in his darkest moments, Barrymore was unforgettable. He was as celebrated for his immense talent as for his twisted, outrageous legacy. Zsa Zsa Gabor. If there was ever a book on being a diva, then Zsa Zsa Gabor wrote it. Her name became synonymous with Hollywood excess. Her glamour, wit, and boldness made her a tabloid fixture for decades, but many didn't see behind her glittering facade. It hid a woman who thrived on drama and controversy. She often created chaos to stay the center of attention. Her notorious behavior was a far cry from the polished, charming public image she projected. One of her most infamous moments occurred in 1989 when, during a traffic stop in Los Angeles, Gabor slapped a police officer after he issued her a ticket. The officer, just doing his job, faced Zsa Zsa's famous temper. She was arrested for assaulting an officer. Many were shocked, but Gabor was unfazed. Her reaction was exactly what she craved: attention. The news was full of the incident. Gabor's name was in the headlines. It cemented her as the Hollywood bad girl who could do no wrong. Or so she thought. Her legal troubles didn't stop there. Gabor was involved in a number of bizarre lawsuits and public feuds, many of which centered around her brash disregard for authority. She was known to sue anyone who crossed her path, from her former husbands to ex-business associates. Her behavior often caused friction with the very people she worked with, from directors to co-stars, as she wasn't afraid to challenge the norms of Hollywood. She had a famously strained relationship with the press, constantly making headlines for her outrageous remarks. Zsa once declared, "I am a marvelous housekeeper. Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." Her numerous marriages, 9 times in total, were often the subject of ridicule and fascination. Her love life became a spectacle, sometimes tumultuous, always in the spotlight. Her marriages were seen as glamorous, but they showed her selfishness. Whether she was collecting husbands like trophies or fighting bitterly in court for alimony, Zsa Zsa made sure her personal life was as dramatic as her on-screen roles. One of her most famous marriages was to a millionaire named Conrad Hilton. Yes, the Hilton Hotel heir. But she quickly moved on to others, proving that even the most famous last names couldn't hold her down. In many ways, Zsa Zsa was ahead of her time in embracing fame for fame's sake. She was a master at keeping herself relevant, constantly pushing boundaries in a world where conformity ruled. Yet, behind the tabloid headlines and glamorous parties, was a woman. She loved nothing more than to be the center of attention, no matter the cost. Alfred Hitchcock. For starters, Hitchcock had this unsettling obsession with his actresses, and it wasn't just about casting them in leading roles. He needed control. Take Tippi Hedren, for example. She starred in The Birds, but their working relationship turned into a nightmare. Hitchcock was obsessed with her, so much so that it bordered on harassment. He isolated her from the crew. He then put her in danger with live birds for dramatic effect. He manipulated her until she was emotionally and physically drained. This wasn't just a case of director-actor tension, it was a power trip. Hitchcock's treatment of Hedren was so bad that it ended up ruining her career, and she spent years trying to heal from the trauma. And Hedren wasn't the only one. Hitchcock was known for treating many of his leading ladies like property, especially his cool blonde types. Kim Novak, Grace Kelly, and others were cast in these roles that made them appear cold, distant, almost unattainable. But Hitchcock's obsession with these women went beyond just casting. He tried to control and shape them into his ideal woman. This control extended to their personal lives, their careers, and even their physical appearances. It wasn't uncommon for Hitchcock to demand things from his actresses that pushed their comfort zones, all in the name of his films. Then there's the creepy girl phenomenon. Hitchcock had a habit of referring to his actresses as the girl, like they were mere objects in his movies, not individuals with their own personalities and desires. It wasn't just a nickname, it was a way to distance them from their own identities and reduce them to something to be molded, shaped, and frankly, controlled. He could have been talking about any woman, as long as she fit his image of what a Hitchcock heroine should be, and if she didn't, well, that was a problem. It didn't stop with his actresses. Hitchcock's marriage to Alma Reville, a brilliant editor and collaborator, was equally complicated. They were married for over 50 years, but Hitchcock was hardly a model husband. Hitchcock reportedly had many affairs with actresses, including Ingrid Bergman and Vera Miles. This was despite Alma's key role in his success. Alma was the silent partner, the one who stayed by his side through it all. She was a smart, talented woman, but in their marriage, she was often sidelined. Hitchcock's obsessions and infidelities took center stage. Hitchcock was a genius at film, but he had a dark side. His twisted behavior towards the women in his life, actresses, his wife, and others, reveals it. He created many cinematic icons, but his actions marred his legacy. Ida Lupino. But for all of her accolades, Lupino's reputation behind the scenes is much more complicated. She wasn't exactly the easygoing, collaborative type that many directors aim to be. In fact, she was known for being tough, blunt, and sometimes downright difficult to work with. Her no-nonsense approach to directing earned her a reputation for being harsh with her actors, often pushing them to their limits. Her intensity as a director was legendary. Lupino was fiercely dedicated to her vision, but she had little patience for actors who didn't meet her high standards. She demanded perfection, and if she didn't get it, she wasn't shy about showing her frustration. She was known to be incredibly direct, sometimes to the point of being cutting or dismissive of an actor's performance. Some actors would later reflect on how uncomfortable and alienating the process of working with her could be. Lupino's directing style was notorious for one thing. She would play mind games with her cast and crew to get the performance she wanted. She understood the psychological power dynamics of filmmaking and wasn't afraid to manipulate them to get what she needed on screen. For example, she might withhold praise, or she might create an uncertain atmosphere. This would force her actors to question themselves and dig deeper into their roles. This psychological pressure was tough for the actors. It sometimes caused breakdowns or major conflicts on set. In some cases, Lupino would go to extreme lengths to get the raw emotion she wanted from her actors. This included putting them in uncomfortable situations, or it meant forcing them to relive their fears and anxieties. One of her more infamous tactics was her willingness to push her actors beyond their limits for the sake of authenticity in the performance. While some actors appreciated her intense dedication to capturing real emotion, others found her methods manipulative or even cruel. She was known to sometimes alienate her cast with her demands, which led to tension on set and occasional clashes. Despite these harsh tactics, Lupino's films were often praised for their emotional depth and unflinching portrayal of uncomfortable truths, particularly around issues like mental health, domestic violence, and gender roles. In fact, her 1950 film Outrage was one of the first Hollywood films to address the trauma of non-consensual intercourse, a subject that was incredibly taboo at the time. But these films were also a product of Lupino's unique and sometimes twisted approach to filmmaking, where her desire to challenge the system, push boundaries, and expose raw human emotion sometimes meant disregarding the comfort and well-being of those who worked under her direction. Stanley Kubrick. Known for his obsessive perfectionism, Kubrick's approach to filmmaking was anything but easygoing. He was famous for taking many retakes, sometimes dozens. He often pushed his actors and crew to their limits to achieve his perfect shot. His control over every aspect of production became legendary, and many people who worked with him found the experience emotionally draining. One of the most infamous examples of Kubrick's harsh working methods came during the making of The Shining. To get the kind of performance he wanted from actress Shelley Duvall, Kubrick pushed her to the edge of a mental breakdown. Duvall, already under immense pressure playing the role of Wendy Torrance, was subjected to constant emotional strain. Kubrick would have her perform the same scene repeatedly for hours on end, leading to exhaustion and frustration. In some instances, he would even reduce her to tears, convincing her that the emotional turmoil was essential for the role. This type of treatment left a lasting impact on Duvall, who later spoke out about how the experience nearly destroyed her. But the abusive behavior wasn't limited to Duvall. Kubrick's methodical approach often created tension among his cast and crew. He had a reputation for causing conflicts to control the set. By fostering an atmosphere of tension and competition, he ensured that no one felt safe or comfortable enough to challenge him or his vision. This toxic environment led to emotional exhaustion and, in some cases, resulted in actors quitting or becoming disillusioned with the entire process. The end result was often a brilliant film, but at a high cost to the well-being of those involved. Kubrick's insistence on absolute control and perfectionism turned his sets into emotionally grueling places to work. Barbara Stanwyck. Her career, which spanned over 6 decades, made her one of the most respected actresses of her time, but her private life was anything but glamorous. Despite the image of the strong, independent woman she cultivated, her personal relationships were marked by chaos and dysfunction. Stanwyck's marriage to actor Robert Taylor was a trouble-filled one, with emotional distance and bitter conflict. Their marriage was constantly in the spotlight, and rumors of affairs and infidelities on both sides swirled around them. One of the most talked-about rumors was her alleged affair with a woman. It was a detail not openly discussed at the time, but it added another layer of scandal to her already complicated personal life. Beyond her love life, Stanwyck's emotional coldness extended to her family. She adopted a son, but their relationship was far from warm. Reports suggest she was emotionally neglectful toward him, and she struggled with being a nurturing figure. Her demanding, work-focused personality seemed to overshadow her ability to connect with those closest to her. She was known to be manipulative and distant, often keeping people at arm's length, even those she should have trusted the most. Despite being one of Hollywood's most talented and powerful women, Stanwyck's personal life painted a picture of a woman who was far from the dependable, strong role model she portrayed on screen. Marlene Dietrich. One of the most talked-about rumors surrounding her was her foot fetish. Dietrich was said to have a particular attraction to men's feet, something she wasn't shy about. She reportedly enjoyed having her lovers indulge in this fetish, and it was part of her complex and private sexual life. This unusual preference wasn't just a fleeting interest. It was said to be a defining part of her intimate relationships. The actress's openness about her sexual desires was part of her larger effort to defy societal norms, and she was known to embrace whatever made her feel empowered, even if it shocked the conservative Hollywood of the time. Beyond her bedroom preferences, Dietrich's approach to fashion was also a form of personal expression. She famously wore men's clothing, including tuxedos, in a period when women's attire was expected to be strictly feminine. Her wardrobe challenged gender norms. She enjoyed playing with her public image as both a desired object and a rebel symbol. By wearing men's suits and sporting a masculine look, Dietrich blurred the lines between traditional gender roles, both in the way she presented herself and the way she lived her life. Dietrich's private life was just as daring and unconventional as her public one, and she embraced her desires without fear or shame. In her fashion, relationships, and approach to fame, she was a woman who knew herself. She didn't care what anyone thought. Vivien Lee. The public knew of her fiery temper and emotional issues, but her complex character had more to it than most realized. Vivien was fascinated by power dynamics in her relationships. She was drawn to and at times surrendered control in the bedroom. Her bipolar disorder caused extreme mood swings. They often shifted the power balance in her relationships. These mood swings sometimes led her to switch between dominant and submissive roles with those close to her. This created a turbulent dynamic. It was said that she thrived on the push and pull of control, often navigating between strength and vulnerability in a way that mirrored the intense characters she portrayed on screen. Lee's emotional range also showed in her personal life. There, the lines between strength and fragility were always shifting. This internal battle played out in her relationships. She was a woman who found herself drawn to the extremes of emotional power, exploring the boundaries of control and surrender in ways that mirrored her own personal struggles. Lana Turner. Her most notorious scandal came in 1958 when her teenage daughter, Cheryl Crane, fatally stabbed Turner's boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, in their Beverly Hills home. The case quickly turned into a media circus, with rumors swirling about Turner's role in the murder and her alleged abusive relationship with Stompanato. Though Turner maintained that she was unaware of her daughter's actions, it exposed a deeply dysfunctional relationship between the mother and daughter. This incident was just one of many in Turner's turbulent personal life, characterized by abusive relationships, alcohol, and emotional instability. Beyond this headline-grabbing event, Turner's private life was full of bizarre behavior and questionable decisions. She was known for her temper and her erratic behavior on set, often making unreasonable demands of her directors and co-stars. Stories of her wild parties, frequent battles with alcohol, and the revolving door of husbands and lovers all added to her reputation as a complex, unpredictable figure. Turner's beauty and charm hid a darker, damaged side. Her past was filled with strange, twisted behaviors at odds with her glamorous image.